I was going. So, boys, homeboys, look, look what Eel Rabbit managed to buy from the bank. You won't believe it. And this is an actual thing. Gold-plated Eisenhower dollar coin. Coins. And I got the good level right here. Let's check it out. A genuine gold plate Eisenhower. And I looked it up, and yeah, these things are apparently real. I literally have a gold coin. Not complete gold, but it's gold plated. I don't think I've ever had gold before. I've never had a golden coin. Alright, I'm gonna watch this video called The Town of Silent Poison, Duckmere, How Picture, Oklahoma. This town is a tornado ghost town. It actually was. This land does not have a happy story. First, Indians were forced off of it, then it became an industrial waste site, and now no one can live there safely.
Nestled right up against Kansas and a mere 15 miles from the Missouri border, sits an abandoned ghost town.
Picture, Oklahoma.
On the off chance you found yourself driving through here, it's likely you wouldn't realize there was a town here at all.
Thin Crusters, the wait is over. Casey's finally has thin crust pizza.
That took him a while.
There are few structures still standing, and the concrete footprints of the houses and businesses that once stood here are largely overgrown, with most hidden behind no trespassing signs. What once was home to over 14,000 people is now in the middle of a 47 square mile swath of land that spent nearly a century silently.
I believe this was a lead mine during the war, and they supplied lead to our boys in the World War II. And, well, either that or arsenic. I don't know what it is, but one thing is certain: there is a lot of waste. There's like these giant piles of industrial waste. And I'm not saying like it's a pile of a house. It's like the pile. These piles range, like the smallest ones are like, I'd say almost like 4 suburban blocks. Or the largest ones could be as large as entire mall complexes. These are big mounds.
Residents and swallowing homes whole. A land that has since been declared uninhabitable by the EPA.
But there's one feature in this town that's impossible to miss. Up to 200-foot tall mountains of what look like gravel and dust that turn the lightly forested, gently rolling hills of northeastern Oklahoma
that is
into
a no-go
something
zone
akin
right
to
here.
a moonscape. But it's these massive gray mountains, the activity that created them, and the people that made it happen, that are responsible for both the region's once immense prosperity and nearly 2 centuries worth of human suffering. This is the story of Pitcher, Oklahoma, and how it became the most toxic town in America.
Sometimes referred to as America's Chernobyl, the story of Pitcher, Oklahoma is an incredibly tragic yet exceedingly complex one. Today, Pitcher is quite literally an environmental wasteland. Once a booming mining town, it is now completely and legally uninhabitable. The remaining piles of waste from the mine activity, called mine tailings, or chat, are loaded with toxic metals, and the over 1,400 mines below the surface of the town have long been abandoned and flooded, contaminating the groundwater and swallowing up entire buildings in massive sinkholes.
In the 1980s, the Environmental Protection Agency placed this entire region on the national priorities list due to its level of toxic metals and acid water. It was designated the Tar Creek Superfund site. And while there are many beginnings one could choose from when attempting to explain what exactly happened here, the fact remains that despite the absolutely vital role that this region played in helping shape the future of the United States, its memory is rapidly fading outside of the Tri-State District. So to best and most respectfully understand how it got to this point, who's ultimately responsible,
Tornadoes hit that
and
place.
what the future holds for this region, we'll need to go back nearly 200 years to a time before this town even existed, or for that matter, before Oklahoma was even a state.
Okapa, the The Quapaws. Sorry
In
if I.
1830, then U.S. President
Butchered that.
Andrew Jackson signed into law the Indian Removal Act. Under the act, the United States government forcibly relocated Native Americans from their ancestral lands to U.S. designated Indian territory west of the
The
Mississippi
feds try to
River
act all
in a
innocent.
brutal migration known as
Feds, we didn't do anything wrong. Nuclear bombed Hiroshima. Here, you only nuked a town. Twice. Removed an entire group of people against their will and forced us onto their land. Oh, the list goes on.
the Trail of Tears. One of those forcibly displaced tribes was the Quapaw tribe, forced westward from Arkansas in 1834 to a reservation in what's now the northeast corner of the state of Oklahoma. While the Quapaws once numbered in the tens of thousands, the journey westward was brutal and unforgiving, with many dying of disease, exposure, and starvation. By the time they reached their designated corner, there were only a few families left. Those that made it settled into the region, and this land was designated as the Quapaw Nation Reservation. But the Quapaws' hardships were far from over. Only a few decades later, they would face a whole new series of challenges, which would severely undermine their already shaky sovereignty and literally undermine their land.
In the late 1800s and early 1900s, lead and zinc ore was discovered on Quapaw Nation land, and multiple mining operations began sprouting up on land leased by some of the Quapaw landowners. But in late 1913, major lead and zinc ore deposits were discovered very close to where I'm standing right now. Multiple mining companies attempted to move on it, but ran into a massive snag. In order to access and mine the vast amount of lead and zinc under this ground, they needed to convince multiple individual Quapaw landowners to lease their land to them in return for royalty payments. But a lot of the Quapaw landowners refused to lease. Without leasing agreements in place, mining companies couldn't legally access the majority of these deposits. So the companies decided to take a different and much more insidious approach.
When your task takes a toll on your lips, that's a job for O'Keeffe's Lip Repair. Guaranteed relief for extremely dry, cracked lips.
To get around the resistance from landowners, mining companies, primarily the Eagle Pitcher Lead Company, teamed up with the Federal Bureau of Indian Affairs. They lobbied the Bureau to pursue the only technically legal route available to lease the land from the Quapaw owners without the owner's permission. The Bureau of Indian Affairs successfully pressured Congress into declaring 62 individual Quapaw landowners legally incompetent and unable to care for their own
Totally not
property or
scummy at
business
all.
affairs. This was a devastating and dehumanizing blow to the Quapaw Nation and indisputably an absolute moral failure of the United States government. With the Bureau of Indian Affairs now in
And the
control
feds
over
suck when it
decisions
comes
of
to
whether or not to
moral,
lease the land, to
like,
whom, and what
rights.
percentage in royalties the Quapaw landowners would receive, the mining companies, with the U.S. government in their pocket, had effectively stolen this land and its resources away from the Quapaw they had forced there in the first place.
The boom.
As mining operations ramped up rapidly, this region became the largest single source of lead and zinc in the United
Yeah,
States.
lead.
Nearly 50% of the lead and zinc used by the U.S. in World War I came not just from the region overall, but from Pitcher Field itself. The lead was used to produce bullets and bomb shells, and the zinc helped prevent rusting on tanks and various steel equipment. By 1926, it had become the world's largest single source. Over the region's mining lifetime, a total of around 1.7 million tons of lead and nearly 8.9 million tons of zinc were produced.
Ooh.
Keep in mind, those are not the figures for the raw ore. Those are the figures for the amount of actual lead and zinc concentrate. But with the vast amount of raw ore being pulled out of the ground came the need to significantly increase their processing capacity. So numerous mills were built alongside the mines. By 1927, 248 mills were in operation to process the over 180 million tons of crude ore. To process this massive volume of raw ore, it was first crushed into much smaller pieces. In some cases, they would use dry gravity separation. This is mostly where the pebble-sized chunks come from, creating a gravel-like consistency. Alternatively, they would use what's called a froth flotation pond, where the ground ore would be mixed with toxic chemicals, including cyanide, and frothed, with the lead and zinc floating to the top to separate out. Once they extracted the metals...
Oh my god! Oh, no. No, 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 no. They're touching it with their hands. I'm sorry, but lead, nickel, cadmium, all these toxic metals, wear gloves, man. I don't care who you are. Wear gloves.
They discard the leftover waste into ever-growing piles near the mills.
The chat pile you see behind me is just one of nearly 300 that accumulated around Pitcher, some ones towering over 200 feet tall. When you pull up a satellite view of the region, it's almost impossible to miss, appearing like somebody fired a giant shotgun from the sky over the northeast corner of Oklahoma. And, similar to buckshot, this thing is loaded with toxic metals, specifically lead, zinc, and cadmium.
But while we now better understand the impact these chat piles and the mines they came from would have on Pitcher and nearby communities, not as much attention was paid to their effects on people at the time. And tragically, that lack of alarm and urgency would spell disaster for the area's residents.
The town.
To support the immense success of mining operations, towns sprang up almost immediately in the surrounding area, and in the center of it all was Pitcher. The town was named in honor of O.S. Pitcher, the founder of the Pitcher Lead Company, which had merged with the Eagle White Lead Company in 1916, forming Eagle Pitcher Lead. At its beginnings, Pitcher was a lawless place, full of corruption and violence, not unlike many of the other mining boom towns that sprung up during the mid-19th to early 20th centuries. But despite its rowdy start, Pitcher grew rapidly in population and commerce, and was incorporated in 1918. But because it was situated in Quapaw Nation, the land could not be taxed, so civic organizations were formed to raise money and create Pitcher's backbone, building schools, paving roads, and setting up utilities. At its peak in 1926, Pitcher was home to over 14,000 residents, with another 14,000 miners working the field, some commuting by trolley from places as far as Carthage, Missouri.
Today, it's hard to imagine that this was ever a bustling town. In fact, I'm currently walking what used to be downtown Pitcher, but as you can see around me, there's not a single building left standing. There are few indications that this was ever anything more than rural.
Man, like, usually,
apart from a few
even with the disaster of, what's it called? Even with the disaster of, Centralia, Pennsylvania, there were still buildings, but the buildings here are just gone. Like, it's like, oh, like tornadoes came through, but
grown
yeah,
concrete foundations and a couple crumbling columns. But as with all mining towns, the growth and prosperity brought on by digging up the Earth's natural resources for profit can only last as long as there's still something to dig up, and what you can dig up is still profitable.
the bus.
As demand for lead and zinc declined through the 1930s, mining operations began to wind down. But the United States' entry into the Second World War generated renewed significant government-subsidized production. Its lead and zinc output was once again so substantial that Pitcher Field was referred to by some as the mines that won World War II. But the bloodshed that drove its second wind of prosperity could only go on so long. The end of the Second World War brought a sudden and drastic decrease in demand for lead and zinc. Mining activity and output continued to decline through the years, and by 1967, all mining operations had ceased. But the mine shafts remained, as did 70 million tons of chat and 36 million tons of mill sand and sludge. Throughout the entire active mining period, companies had been continuously pumping out groundwater from these mines. They knew, even back then, that if they didn't keep them dry, the mines would flood, resulting in the groundwater being contaminated with toxic metals and sulfuric acid. With this in mind, Eagle Pitcher Lead had offered to backfill the over 1,400 mine shafts with the chat, but the U.S. Department of the Interior, then in charge of the lease agreements, told them not to bother, claiming that, quote, the land's value for farming purposes has already been greatly impaired, if not destroyed. The U.S. government, recognizing the horrible condition the land...
Oh no, you can't use this area for farming. It's okay. It's okay, Illinois, Indiana, and Iowa. We all got you. We all got you. We're. By the way, guys, I'm just gonna say this. I'll preface this again. If you have never been to Illinois, there's nothing out here. There are like 95% of the state. You go with the far southern parts of Illinois. It's just nothing. Like, I mean, like, you could stand and you could literally see, like, towns off in the distance on a clear sunny day. It's insane.
Those left in knew that the groundwater would become contaminated over time as the mines inevitably flooded. Yet they remained wholly unconcerned by it, and much of the land was returned to the Quapaws with the expiration
Here you go.
of mining leases. Little corrective action.
You can have your land back.
Mining companies moved out
with these
Chaparrals were
toxic
left
plastic
towering,
cadmium.
and the mines were left to flood.
Contamination. This
The
guy
way
is
in
really
which
good.
mining waste contaminates its environment is particularly pernicious, and the spread is extremely difficult to contain, especially if you're starting decades after abandonment. At its core, there are two primary forms of contamination: toxic metals from the chat piles and mines, and sulfuric acid. The chat that's gravel-like in consistency isn't necessarily all that dangerous on its own in small amounts. While the chunks are larger, lead concentration is significantly lower, and the weight makes it less likely to blow around and cross-contaminate. But on the bottom of these piles are bases of much finer mill sand and silt. These finer grains contain around 1,000 times the concentration of toxic metals, most notably lead, compared to the larger chunks. And with their smaller size, they have a higher bioavailability, and the particles can be more easily swept away by wind, continuously contaminating nearby areas. But the spread of contamination from the chat piles doesn't only occur when the chat gets blown around by the wind. It also happens when it gets wet. With any amount of rain, water that hits, gets absorbed, and runs off chat piles carries with it toxic metals. The runoff collects into small streams, and in the case of the Tar Creek Superfund site, finds its way to Tar Creek, increasing the lead, zinc, and cadmium concentration of the water with every rainstorm. But there's another type of contamination hitting Tar Creek, one that's much more immediately obvious if you know where to look. When an open mine containing sulfur-bearing metals such as lead and zinc gets exposed to oxygen and then flooded, sulfuric acid dissolves into the water from the wells of the mines. That water then floods up to the surface or flows through the aquifers underground and enters the creek. This is referred to as acid mine drainage. Sulfuric acid is a highly toxic, highly acidic mineral acid. Human exposure results in burns on any part of the body that comes in contact with it, and ingestion of a concentrated dose can be lethal, burning a hole straight through the stomach. When a large amount of sulfuric acid is introduced to bodies of water, it coats the shore and sediment in what looks like rust, giving it a bright orange or red color. Here is a clear and modern example of this in action. The larger body of water you see here is Tar Creek, flowing south. A stream containing sulfuric acid is emptying into Tar Creek from the east. This
Oh my
stream is
god,
referred to
that's
as
awful.
Lytle Creek, and it's flowing straight from a flooded sinkhole. Also seen here is a small roadside stream flowing from the west side that appears to be runoff from a nearby chat pile and base due to rain from the day before. On the other side of the bridge, you can see the mixture of the two creeks, a muddy reddish water that will continue winding its way south through Tar Creek to the Neosho River and ultimately end up in Grand Lake. When this region first popped up on the EPA's radar in the late 1970s, it was primarily over concerns regarding water quality and contamination. It was already well known that if water was not continuously pumped out of the mine shafts, they would eventually flood and contaminate the groundwater. And that's exactly what happened. In 1983, the Environmental Protection Agency declared the region a Superfund site, a designation the EPA gives to locations contaminated with hazardous material that pose a threat to human health and the environment. It was named the Tar Creek Superfund after Tar Creek, the main body of water running the length of it. The next year, in 1984, the EPA teamed up with the Oklahoma State Department of Health and began sealing off contaminated wells and diverting contaminated water away from Tar Creek while monitoring groundwater quality. In fact, one of these original diversions was Lytle Creek. In the early 1980s, Lytle Creek flowed through a flooded sinkhole on its way to Tar Creek. They diverted the water west to meet Tar Creek further north so it would avoid picking up sulfuric acid along the way. But contaminated water from that flooded sinkhole is still flowing into Tar Creek at Lytle Creek's original meeting point, over 37 years after its diversion, albeit at a reduced flow rate. The EPA considered in water diversions and continued to monitor until 1991. But despite the massive amount of mining waste remaining and the fact that water was continuing to get contaminated by flooded mines and an ever-growing number of sinkholes opening up, they stopped here, turning a blind eye to the dangers the site still posed to its residents.
As the years went by, parents and teachers began to take notice of an alarming trend. Towns in and around the mining waste, like Pitcher, Cardin, Commerce, Quapaw, and here in Miami, were finding a much higher rate of learning disabilities and behavioral problems in children when compared to other places in Oklahoma, even those with similar or lower socioeconomic statuses.
Ever since the piles of mining waste started accumulating, some residents in the area had been using chat from these piles to pave driveways, lay foundations for houses, and even fill their kids' sandboxes. It was also very common for families to spend an afternoon at the beach being a chat and mill sand shore lining a flooded sinkhole. But hidden in the sand were toxic levels of lead, zinc, and cadmium. And the water not only contained the same, but was also contaminated with sulfuric acid. What were thought to be just sunburns from a day at the beach were at least partially chemical burns. People were literally swimming in acid. For a few thousand years, humans have well understood that exposure to lead can be toxic. But it wasn't until much more recently in the 1970s that we discovered just how little lead it takes to become a big problem for children. In 1950, a pediatrician named Herbert Needleman began documenting the effects of lower-level lead toxicity in children.
Yeah, basically what it does is lead causes reproductive harm, and worse, it removes oxygen from the blood cells. Now, you need oxygen to, carry away, it can carry away carbon dioxide, and it's needed for cellular respiration. Now, if the oxygen is removed from the blood cell, it literally suffocates you. This is why lead is a very bad thing to ingest. Lead, the only thing good for lead is ammunition, weights, and radiation protection.
Unsurprisingly, had been met with significant resistance from the lead and mining industries. But in March 1979, Needleman published a study in the New England Journal of Medicine that linked the concentration of lead in children's teeth to teacher-reported learning and behavioral problems, like distractibility, organizational ability, ability to follow sequences, and overall functioning. Needleman's work was incredibly influential, and it was published amidst an ongoing discussion around what blood lead concentration was considered safe in children. Prior to the study's publishing, any blood lead concentration above 40 micrograms per deciliter was considered toxic, and even that was a drop from a previous limit of 60 micrograms. Then, in 1971, they dropped that to 30 micrograms, then 25 micrograms in 1978, then 10 in 1991, and today, it's only 5. While lead exposure can present problems in any human with an elevated blood lead level, kids 6 and under are particularly more vulnerable to lead-related damage than adults. Where adults absorb roughly 20 to 60% of lead ingested, children absorb 50 to 100%, with the absorption rate dependent on stomach contents. And that lead is stored in teeth and bones, like calcium, and can be drawn out from the bones and back into the bloodstream when calcium is lacking, resulting in compounding organ and neurological damage. But alongside these studies and discussions around safe blood lead concentration levels over the years grew an ever-increasingly horrifying realization. If lead was more toxic than we previously thought, particularly in children, then that means for decades they had been, and continued to be, silently poisoned. In 1994, the Indian Health Service tested the blood lead levels of children living within the Superfund site. They found that an alarming 35% of children ages 0 to 6 had levels exceeding the then 10 microgram per deciliter federal limit. The Ottawa County Health Department conducted their own tests as well and found 43% of children were above the limit. By today's 5 microgram standard, that percentage would have been significantly higher. They urgently reported these findings to the EPA. In August that same year, the EPA began testing for toxic metals in soil in places where children tend to come together and play, like daycares, playgrounds, and parks. And the results were explosive, revealing significant levels of lead, zinc, and cadmium contamination spread across the region. So in 1996, the EPA began to dig up and remove dirt on any lots that tested hot for lead, replacing it with clean soil. From 1996 to 2014, the EPA spent over $200 million replacing contaminated soil on over 2,900 lots, with an average spend of about $70,000 per lot. While yard remediation efforts were underway, the EPA also created a community relations plan. They held meetings to educate the residents of the area and encouraged campaigns to spread awareness of the toxicity of the mining waste. Signs and flyers, many created by children, were scattered through towns, discouraging the relocation and use of chat and warning of the dangers of lead. But over time, it became increasingly clear that the EPA's actions were not only severely delayed, but wholly inadequate to address the level of danger plaguing the towns surrounding the mining waste, especially Pitcher. And a growing group of concerned citizens would make sure those in power weren't about to mark the job complete. Ever since the EPA found lead contamination in and around the Tar Creek Superfund site, some Pitcher residents began attempting to lobby the government to buy them out. Their town, their water, their yards, their own homes were poisoning themselves and their children. And not only was there nobody lining up to buy property next to or inside a Superfund
Property value's
site,
gone, man. You're stuck.
built on still belonged to the Quapaws. Banks weren't about to loan money to purchase a home built on contaminated land the homeowner didn't even own. But there was also significant resistance to buyouts at multiple levels. Many older Pitcher residents, some of whom had lived there most or all of their lives, were staunch opponents of any buyout options. Some even refused to accept the scientific findings regarding lead contamination, claiming the source of lead in the soil was from the paint of demolished houses rather than resulting from the waste of 1.7 million tons of lead.
Losers can't accept science.
And then there was the resistance at the political level. Oklahoma Senator James Inhofe served as chairman for the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works from 2003 to 2007, then again from 2015 to 2017. Inhofe's first term as chairman coincided with the buyout discussions, and since the Environment and Public Works Committee oversees the EPA, many in favor of buyout plans thought Inhofe would recognize the dangers posed to the community and recommend buyout options. Unfortunately for them, the opposite proved true. It turns out James Inhofe and his brother, Perry Inhofe, were owners of the Mid-Continent Casualty Company, an insurance firm which specialized in insuring clients with, quote, difficult or unique exposures. Mid-Continent Casualty was sold in the 1980s and is now part of the financial behemoth American Financial Group, but their specialty remains the same. They exist to insure clients whose industries put other people and property at risk. And this presents a significant conflict of interest on Inhofe's part, not only as a sitting senator, but as a chairman overseeing the EPA. Inhofe pushing for the EPA to approve federal buyouts would have, in effect, been an admission that the land was toxic enough to be considered uninhabitable. And if it were deemed uninhabitable, that would open a door of liability for the people and corporations that made it that way. That would hit too close to home, given Inhofe's ties to those responsible parties. To muddy it up even more, some of NHOP's top donors included those in the oil, gas, and, of course, mining industries. Pushing for buyouts would equal fewer campaign contributions, but shooting buyout talks down would secure future contributions, along with the potential for kickbacks. For a man whose business it was to protect polluters' pocketbooks and openly preached man-made climate change to be a hoax, it hardly comes as any
This
surprise
is why I
who
hate
he
politicians,
cited.
dude. I cannot stand them. Most of them can't accept basic logic or science. I do not. I'm sorry, but I just can't. I don't like them. They provide excuses to why we shouldn't push for change. They delay the inevitable. And they are always in denial. Guess what? Wake up, buddy. There's a thing called climate change. I know it sounds shocking to you, okay? I know this might sound like a weird revelation, but yes, it is real. Unlike your sense of credibility. And we do need to do something about it. Because if we don't, we're not going to have a good generation. Our future generation will be doomed.
Emissions is simply untrue and not based on sound science. Wake up, America, with all the hysteria,
Wake up,
all the
you.
fear, all the phony science. Could it be that
It's people like
man-made
this that
global
literally
warming
make
is
change
the greatest
impossible.
hoax ever perpetrated on the American people? I believe it is.
Oh my god.
Rather than pushing for buyouts, Inhofe instead spent 3 years
That makes me
drafting
so
a plan
irate.
$45 million to the project. When this plan was announced,
Accept
people
science,
immediately
buddy.
calculated what a cleanup of this scale would realistically cost and how long it would take. It would not take $45 million. It would take over $225 million. And it would take 50 trucks a day, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 40 years. Inhofe's proposal was not only grossly inadequate to address the toxicity of the site and preserve the safety of residents, it was physically impossible. And all at once, it became abundantly clear that Pitcher's political hopes were dashed. The man who had the most political power and the most potential to help was refusing to do so, choosing instead to protect the financial interests of himself and his donors rather than secure the safety of his constituents. In June 2004, in response to Inhofe's refusal to consider buyout negotiations, coupled with an ever-increasing number of havens, the governor of Oklahoma,
What a poor
Brad
excuse
Henry,
for
stepped
failure.
in direct and defiant opposition to Senator Inhofe. Henry signed legislation that enabled the state of Oklahoma to offer buyouts, but the state simply couldn't afford to buy everybody out, so they...
Back then, it was all for the people, all for the freedom. Now, it's for one thing. Now, sadly, guess what? Oh god, stepped on a bucket. Sadly, you know, it's not for the American people anymore. It's for this instead. See it? This is what's valued over your life. Money. Money, 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 money. Should we care for our citizens or just care for our money?
Added voluntary buyout orders to families with children 6 years and under living in the
poor families probably don't even have enough justice.
By the end of 2005, 55 families had been relocated, costing the state only $3 million. But while these select few families were able to move to relative safety, the level of danger posed to those they left behind was growing.
The danger.
For decades, sinkholes have been opening up as a result of mines collapsing, and the rate of these cave-ins was increasing over time, some swallowing up entire buildings, including people's homes. So around the time the voluntary buyout program kicked off in 2004, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers began to evaluate the subsidence risk of towns within the Tar Creek Superfund site in an attempt to quantify the level of danger posed by these cave-ins. And about 2 years later, in January 2006, the Army Corps of Engineers released their report. They determined 286 locations within the site had an elevated subsidence risk due to the abandoned mines below them. In Pitcher alone, there are 139 houses, 11 businesses, 13 public use facilities, including churches, utility buildings, and parks, and 78 roads at risk of collapse. 86% of Pitcher's buildings, most of them still in use, could collapse without a moment's notice. The slowly creeping nature of toxic metal poisoning was now usurped by a much more imminent and visible threat: the threat of being swallowed whole. Homes and businesses falling through the ground is a highly visible problem, and constituents ending up on the wrong side of a sinkhole was just the right amount of political push needed to convince Oklahoma Senator James Inhofe to finally commit to assisting Tar Creek's remaining residents. On May 4th, 2006, Senator Inhofe, U.S. House Representative Dan Boren, and Governor Brad Henry released a press statement announcing a federal buyout program to voluntarily relocate those still living and running businesses within Pitcher and the nearby town of Cardin. By that point, Pitcher's population had dwindled down to a little over 1,000 residents, among them some of the most determined holdouts. In speaking with the press, Inhofe gladly accepted credit for the buyout program, stating, quote, "Buying out these residents and removing them from Tar Creek will eliminate a very serious risk to these Oklahoma families.
Finally, you could have done that a long
quote,
time
today,
ago.
we have made residents of an important Oklahoma community much safer." This statement
Could have
came
done it
after
earlier.
years of Inhofe denying the importance of that specific Oklahoma community and insisting no buyout relief would ever be provided for residents. With the announcement of a federal buyout program came a final realization for the people that had remained. The town of Pitcher, as it stood on May 4th, 2006, was only ever going to continue falling apart. There would be no progress, no hope for the future. There would be no new homes, no businesses moving in, no investments, no money, and eventually, no people. With what little was left of Pitcher's population leaving for safer land, these schools would soon shut down. Services and utilities would become restricted. Most businesses would close or move to surrounding areas, and the town would eventually be disincorporated, leaving them abandoned and alone on poisoned, undermined land that was primed to fall out from underneath them at any time. But a little over 2 years later, the buyouts would be interrupted by yet another disaster. However, rather than building up over decades, this one was to be swift, massively destructive, and completely unavoidable.
You know? Yep. That's it. Right there. That right there is what put the final nail in the coffin for the dying Oklahoma town of Pitcher, Oklahoma. A tornado finally struck through and destroyed it, putting an end to a dying town. It's a tornado ghost town. That's what I said earlier. This town is called The Disaster.
At 5:40 p.m. on May 10th, 2008, an EF4 tornado struck Pitcher. 6 people were killed, over 150 injured, and nearly 200 of the homes remaining were destroyed. Debris blocked roads for days. Emergency crews scrambled to transport the injured to the nearest hospital in Miami, and Governor Brad Henry called in the National Guard to assist with rescue and recovery. The federal government, rather than providing aid to rebuild as they often do in natural disasters of this scale, opted to continue with the buyout process, and they would encounter a lot less resistance now, given that, tragically, many of the holdouts no longer had homes left to sell. The 2008 tornado was the final death blow to a dying town. On September 1st, 2009, the state of Oklahoma officially disincorporated Pitcher. The voluntary buyouts were completed by the end of June that year. Pitcher Cardin High School had graduated its final class that same month, and the post office had delivered its final batch of mail by July. While there were still about 6 homes and 1 business that refused to leave at any price, Pitcher, after decades of lead-related health problems, sinkholes, and political embattlements, had officially ceased to exist.
This was once one of Pitcher's residential neighborhoods. In fact, if you pull this area up on Street View, at least at the time of this video, you can still see the homes that used to stand here. Some were demolished as part of the federal buyout process, and most of the remainder were flattened by the 2008 tornado. Fast forward 15 years, and this, like most of this now unincorporated town, is just a grid of crumbling asphalt, serving close to nothing and going nowhere. But despite the complete loss of the town, coupled with the EPA's delayed and arguably inadequate response over the past 4 decades, not all hope is lost for this land.
When buying a new mattress,
It sucks. That could have been a good town, a happy town, but no, people just carelessly throw it and jeopardize its future.
From mining activities all the way through to decades of fragmented cleanup efforts. But on October 1st, 2012, the EPA and the Quapaw tribe entered into a cooperative agreement that gave the Quapaws control over some of the remedial actions taken within the Tar Creek Superfund site. This was the first agreement of its kind between federal and tribal governments. Cleanup began ramping up through the 2010s, accelerated by a renewed focus on Tar Creek, with the full involvement and cooperation of the Quapaw tribe. The vast majority of Pitcher's remaining structures were demolished by 2013, leaving behind a pockmarked landscape of chat piles, concrete foundations, and roads leading nowhere. On September 17, 2019, the EPA announced the release of the final strategic plan for the cleanup at Tar Creek. The plan was created in coordination with the state of Oklahoma and the Quapaw tribe. It highlights ongoing remediation efforts, like continuing to plug abandoned wells and diverting water to limit acid mine drainage, or continuing to monitor soil for toxic metals and performing yard remediation, or the decades-long effort to remove and clean up the most prominent features of the site, the chat piles themselves. This time around, with the Quapaw taking the lead, there can be some hope that the speed
That makes
and
me
quality
happy
of
that
the
there's
cleanup efforts
there is
finally
hope.
reflect a deeply rooted reverence for the land itself. But one question continues to weigh on nearby residents' minds. Will this cleanup be fast enough to prevent further contamination? While cleanup efforts have increased significantly in the past few years, so has the amount of rain. Climate change has brought on higher precipitation in the region, which results in higher amounts of toxic metal runoff from
And
the
tornadoes
chat
can
bases,
just loft
as
all
well
that
as
stuff
more
away
acid
and
mine water
spread it.
draining into Tar Creek.
They need to get
Additionally,
rid of it
flooding
fast.
in Ottawa County has increased, but not just as a result of the increased rainfall. If the water were allowed to flow naturally, it would wind its way down to Neosho River and empty into Grand Lake with only minor flooding events. But Grand Lake residents, the most influential of which is Senator James Inhofe himself, who owns this vacation home on the lake, fought to keep control over Grand Lake's water levels by use of the Pensacola Dam in order to, quote, make the lake a better place for recreation and commerce. The use of the dam to control water levels directly for the purposes of fun and money significantly increases flooding events and risk further north in Ottawa County, especially in Miami. And flooding further contaminates the area with chat runoff and acid water, undoing decades worth of yard remediation efforts and toxic metal containment. Inhofe's legislation was, to put it mildly, self-interested, and to put it bluntly, a direct reflection of his lifelong lack of human decency. Thankfully, in January 2023, James Inhofe finally resigned from Congress after 29 years of public service, 6 of which he spent as chairman of the committee that oversees the Environmental Protection Agency. And with some of his final pieces of legislation, Inhofe made it abundantly clear that it was only ever himself, not the public, that he intended to serve.
Loser. Finally, he was got out of office.
So what's next for the Tar Creek Superfund site at large? Well, to be honest, it's a little hard to know what to believe. If we take at face value the final long-term strategic plan put out by the EPA in 2019, things would appear to be looking up. Chat pile removal and remediation has picked up significantly.
I think I
Ottawa
started
County
chicken laying
continues
egg.
to very closely monitor blood lead levels in children, and Quapaw Nation is finally able to help take the lead on some of these cleanup initiatives. But even the EPA, in their own strategic plan, admits that they don't know how long this will take, or how much it'll cost, using overly vague terms like decades and multi-millions of dollars in place of even the roughest estimates. As for Pitcher's immediate future, it will remain an ever-fading photographic negative of what it once was. as the empty concrete foundations and rotting debris continue to be swallowed up and reclaimed by nature. And if there's anything that we can learn from this as a country, hell, as a species, any sliver of experience we can use to prevent the brutal and remorseless exploitation of Earth's resources and the endless pursuit of personal wealth, well, for our children's sake, I sure hope we've learned it.
The poorest region in America, what it really looks like.
When the
Deep
stakes are high at
Appalachia.
work, your tone matters. Grammarly's advanced tone suggestions can help.
What a different America out here.
God.
Use up some of the haulers. You think that's a good idea? You lost him again!
A lot of people don't understand that if it wasn't for coal mines, a lot of these people around here would be starving to death.
Feels like everybody picked up and left.
Man, these people out here that like always are like rich and like this, like they have it good.
First in my family to hold a college degree.
Are you the grandma of the holler?
I guess.
Massive hit to a community like this.
Abandoned
I
Walmart.
want to show
That's
people that
something
we are
new.
more than just drugs and coal.
We work hard, we support our families.
Oh, I bet they
We
work
wish
hard
could
every
do
day.
that.
This place got me a little mushy.
Heart goes out to those people. They work. They get their hands dirty.
Good morning, guys. Here in Bluefield, West Virginia. Today we have quite.
I was wanting to move to West Virginia because of its beauty. I want to move to Wisconsin because it's closer, but now I realize, sadly, West Virginia is somewhat of a poor state.
Is one of the most impoverished places in the country. Now, this is former coal country. The industry was booming at one time. It's retracted quite a bit. Many people have left, but some have stayed. So today we're going to get far out as we can, into the sticks, to meet the locals, ask the questions, learn from them, and get a better understanding of what this region is like. Let's do this.
Yeah, Appalachia is very notorious for coal mining. Like,
Here we are in McDowell County, and so this is the poorest county in West Virginia. 25,600 is the average family income. So this is the poorest county in West Virginia. 25,600.
25,000. That is abysmal. When I'm saying like the stats are bad, I'm not saying like, oh, you're poor. No, I'm not. That's not what I'm trying to say here. That is like, that's like an eighth of a coder's, or that's like a sixth of a coder's salary. That is sad. Oh my God, I hope there's a way these people can get jobs to, boost the economy and do all this.
Is the average family
See a lot of these people have
Wow.
moved out. You have the coal truck here. Looks like an old school, Switchback Elementary School.
So these tracks right here have brought out tons and tons of coal. And since a lot of that coal has declined, well, this is what happens to the towns. These were once thriving, busy storefronts, people walking around. You got great homes up here above. I'm sure those were like the managers, the coal mines. You can see a lot of these homes, just nature coming back, taking them over. Got a little grocery deli. Let's check it out.
Oh, bet there's probably way more.
It's like a jungle out here.
These forests, very lush, very peaceful,
Bet you there's a lot more buildings there.
very closed. This old place here,
That's a cool little place.
looks like it's been around forever. A staple of the community, pictures, families, people from the town, I'm sure. That's too bad. But what a different America out here. Look at this architecture, some beautiful buildings.
Yes, that's old. I mean,
What town is
this is like West Virginia. Hey! Hey! Look who pulled up! It's It's a Crosstrek. Oh my God, it's a Crosstrek. It's got the most putrid color. Oh my God. What is up, Subaru Cross? That's my car, but it's got the bad color on it. Yeah, it's called like pearl yellow. It's my most disliked color. I don't like it. That looks like a Crosstrek. It looked like it might be a limited. I don't know. It's a very new looking Crosstrek.
It'll be 4 years this December. I moved to here for work.
Cool.
Yes.
You don't think this video is gonna make 100 million?
I don't think so. Maybe if I was 6'5", 260 pounds full of muscle, maybe. All right. Hey, Kenny. All right. I'm doing good. Thank you, Kenny. And that's my neighbor. He's... Kenny, you 76 yet? I'm 77. 77. This gentleman is making a video. Making a video? Of this area.
About Appalachia.
Come on over.
You wanna jump in, T? T's got stories, I can tell.
They look really friendly.
His name is Fred Johnson, and his wife's school children, she was a teacher.
Okay.
Oh, that's a limited. Hold on. Yellow Crosstrek limited 23. Is that 23 limited? The wheels on it. I've never seen. He's got my wheels. That's a that is. That's a 2023 Crosstrek limited. That's a very brand new Crosstrek. That car right there is 31 grand. That is like my exact car right there, but it's a different color. Huh. So much for being a region that's poor. I mean, that guy's got a pretty good car. That's a really nice Crosstrek. Brand new. Where the hell do you get that Crosstrek from? I mean, dude.
Peter Santinello.
Peter Santinello. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too, T.
You find a better man than T. I don't know.
T's the best man in town, or all of McDowell County?
I'd say all of McDowell County. Thank you, Clarence. Thank you, man.
Did you grow up here?
No, I grew up in town.
That's a nice car he's got.
How's McDowell?
I love that Crosstrek. Sorry if I'm simping over the Crosstrek. I just love
Nice,
Crosstreks.
wonderful place to live. People are friendly. Everybody's friendly down here. You don't meet a stranger.
Yeah.
You know, if anybody can help you, they'll help you. If you're sitting on the side of the road at night and got a flat tire, they'll stop and change it. Or if they can't change it, they'll bring you home. Because we had a flood here back in 2001, 2002, and a lady from Bluefield worked at the Welch Hospital. And the water was up all the way through there. And she got to the end of town, and somebody called me, and I went down and got her and brought her up. And she spent the night with us, me and my wife. I let her stay at me. So I didn't know her from Adam.
So a lot of old school values out here.
Old school values, a lot.
What about the younger generation?
They're gone.
They're leaving. They're leaving town?
They're leaving town, and the ones that are here, they don't really care about anything. They just, most of them's on drugs.
Really?
Yeah,
Drug
most
problems.
of them drug problems.
Here.
So from my understanding, talking to some locals, it's either people are on drugs or people are super hardworking. There's like no in between. It's like you got two different groups, right?
That's right. Two different groups. Mostly everybody around here is elderly, except Clarence.
I'm 60 and I'm not elderly.
Well,
yeah.
T's 77 and looking like you're about to play some hoops and dunk the ball.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I used to in my day. I did in my day, but old age catches up with you. Eventually, old age catches up with you.
Did you ever work in the mines, T?
No, I was an electrical motor repairman.
Okay.
I worked in that job for 43 years. We repaired
Good work.
mining motors, steel mill motors.
Yeah.
I guess I've just been all over the world working on different motors and stuff.
What do you mean, be careful going to Harlan County
On
Line?
the road. There's a bunch of drunks on the road on the weekend. This is 4th of July weekend. You gotta watch out for the young folks.
Okay, what about if I cruise up some of the haulers, like, or just the Ben's the one I go up?
It depends on the one you go up.
Okay.
It really depends.
Some of the
Oh, it's a real bad thing. I mean, the roads. Yeah, the roads are real bad, even though you got a Ford. You know what they call this? McDowell County, they call it the patch.
So could I fit into the patch, no problem?
No problem. You fit in.
Just gotta put a little of that on.
That's all. Just a little bit of personality and attitude, you'll be fine.
I'll be your neighbor, Mr. T. Pretty much everyone's involved with the coal industry here. There is a tourism industry starting with side-by-sides and people getting out on these trails here. But as you can see, even Walmart is out of business. A massive hit to a community like this. In the town I was staying in, Bluefield, if I wanted to get groceries, the best place was the Walmart. You want to get an avocado, you want to get probably the most fresh fruits and vegetables outside of a garden, it was Walmart. And so when you have it go away in a community like this, I mean, we're sort of entering, I think we'll get into it today, sort of food desert territory where it's a far way to get pretty much all your staples. You know, outside of mini marts and chips and sugar drinks and whatnot. Very interesting story I was told yesterday by a local. And he told me back in the day, with the coal mining companies, the miners would be paid in scripts, which was their own currency. Each coal mining company had their own currency. The catch was you'd have to go to the equivalent of the Walmart back then, which was a massive general store, depending on the mine, where you buy your food, your clothing, whatever you needed, you buy there. But you could not take that currency and go anywhere else with it. You want to leave town, you want to go off to the coast on a vacation with your family, forget about it.
That's
your
funny.
money only worked for the business that you work for, which is insane.
Every time you feed your pet
No,
hens, you
it's
help
such a
feed the
beautiful
shelter
open
hens,
country too.
which helps make them healthy, happy, and more adoptable, changing their life forever so they can change yours. Science did that.
Here we are in Welsh. It's the county seat. I'm guessing the biggest town here. And look at these buildings.
Those are some cool looking buildings.
Wow, look at this place. Looks like a massive old school up there. Wonder what it is now. We have a jail down here. I think that's what that is. I was told in the last town, one of the nicer homes there was sold for $25,000. So something like this is almost a giveaway at this point, I bet. Closed permanently, 3/13/23. The Panda Garden out of business. Everything pretty much vacant. Walk right down the center of the street here. Back in the day, you could see the boss looking over the workers. Very, very hard work.
It is. And those are garbage conditions to work at the time. Those workers, the workers' rights barely even existed. So if you got hurt, basically, you couldn't do anything. You just had to take it.
Everybody picked up and left. Very cool little building. I was told by a local the other day that these rivers just flowed black back in the day. Socialsecurity.gov. Now we gotta meet some locals eventually, but I was told in these parts, and I can't confirm this at all, but roughly half the people are living off some sort of disability or food stamps or some government assistance, and half are working
working their butts off. Okay, there are two guys up there. First two people in town on the streets. Iraq from 05 to 06?
506 in Baghdad.
He's
A
the
lot of guys
he's a
who were in
vet.
the military?
My man here signed up to get to go. Me and him was going to go in together. And he had to clear some stuff up.
Were you sad that you couldn't go, or did you want to go?
Yeah, I wanted to go back.
Do you guys work in the mines?
Yeah, he worked mine. I don't anymore.
You don't anymore?
You ain't got time to spend no money, so, I mean, you don't enjoy life. Just ain't done enjoy
God,
life.
man. I feel so bad for those people, because, like, they barely even get a paycheck, man. I barely get paid at all, because I work such a low job, and I probably get paid, at least these guys get paid more than me, man. Oh, guys, but some people here probably get paid less than me, which hurts. I really wish they could have a fair chance at money. Yeah. There's a cat walking into this. Yeah. Did you back it up? Is it all gone? How far back was it saved? No, like how many days? How many days is the backup taken? There you go. You live, you learn. Anyway, you wanna know why I said when I said, hey Wyatt, right before you lagged out, you wanna know why? Because a tornado struck down probably less than like 20 miles east of your house, or at least east from the very northeastern tip of Tennessee. A tornado hit, like literally, like a bi-state tornado. Exactly, which is I'm like, yep. I didn't do anything. I'm like, oh. How'd you get grounded? Wow. That's what a dictatorship is like. You won't believe what I got my hands on. an actual legitimate gold-plated Eisenhower dollar, and I didn't even buy it for like $15, which is what they're worth. I just got for the dollar value. I didn't even know they existed. I actually have gold now. Take notes. Ah! Ah! My trees. Other than that, like if the road's okay, that just tells me how. Thank God. I'm about to say if it's been. Man, what sucks is that I tried to ask for a quarter box or a quarter bag, and they said yes, you can have it. You can't turn it into any Heartland location. It's like brrrr. And then like bro, I had a successful day yesterday. Only one out of the 7 banks rejected me. The one bank that rejected me, I didn't have any halfies, but they had a dollar coin. Like, dude, you're gonna reject me of a dollar coin, of like $8 coins, bruh? Like, don't blow smoke up my rear. Nobody uses dollar coins anymore. No one. No one even uses half dollars. There's a reason I like half dollars, because nobody uses them. And they're not used for business. So they get banks, even if you're not a member, they just let you have them. You're breathing in the mic, by the way. I'm sorry, but like you're like heavily breathing in the mic. Okay.
So a miner, how much are they working?
I would work 48 hours every week at least, but sometimes 60 hours, 60 plus hours.
60 hours a week? That's 10 hours a day. Off weekends.
What does that do to your sleep cycle?
It's a video about the poorest region in America. It's Appalachia. If you don't know, back then, Appalachia is notorious for having so much coal. And coal, it powers engines, it powers machines, and it's like an all-around very vital thing. Even today, coal is a very valuable material because it's used to power your homes. However, because of non-stop mining in the region, it's basically dried up all the coal reserves, and so therefore Appalachia's economy is slowly starting to diminish into nothing. And today, it is one of the poor. Education, poor. Food food availability, poor. Housing quality, poor. Everything is awful here. But there are still some people who are still making it here. Still some people who just don't give up. And that just try and try and try. And that's a misc. Or nature.
It's not for me. Now, a lot of people it is for, but it's just not for me anymore.
I use miscellaneous, like what's called like
3 weeks.
Like I have mine separated like overworld mob loots. I have weapons, armors, tools.
Good brotherhood in the military?
I have building blocks.
What about the coal mine? Good brotherhood there?
They do stick. Oh yeah, there's no brotherhood there. Everybody looks out for each other.
How about in Wells right now? Is it a close community?
And you know what I saw in the video?
Everybody looks
The
out.
2023 limited Crosstrek that had the worst color schematic, the worst color available for Crosstreks. If you don't know, they made Crosstreks a putrid yellow, and they are, oh my god, they are awful. Like, the color is just the worst. Also, news for people. I will be going to college starting on August 21st. And I'll try to start my ARC playthrough on August 21st. Because I want to start on a special date. If you could, that'd be interesting. ARC is a very fun game. If you think survival on Minecraft is hard, just wait till you have to survive ARC. ARC is hell. I'm bad at ARC. ARC. Survival Evolved. I'm talking like the good ARC. $20? Are you kidding me? ARC is $20. I got it for $70. Dude, that's a good.
They tight. You get in a holler, everybody knows everybody. Oh yeah. You be a kid down there, get in trouble down here. Time you get home, about 5 people done called your mama saying, "Hey." You get in a holler, everybody knows everybody. Oh yeah. You be a kid down there, get in trouble down here. Time you get home, about 5 people done called your mama saying, "Hey." Time you get there, they're waiting on you. Everybody knows everybody. It's not a good thing sometimes.
You know, I had a few friends telling me, don't come into this part of Appalachia. It's going to be super dangerous. People are going to be closed off. And everyone's been cool.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Everybody, hey, people from out of town and stuff, we get it a lot. You know what I mean? Most of these people on these four-wheelers, they're from other states. They're not from here. They just come down here just to see the country and the mountains.
That's the new industry, huh? You got a bit of tourism out here?
Yeah,
That's helped the little stores really good.
Since they built that Hatfield McCoy Trail, it's been mad people coming here from out of town. It's been crazy.
Why the bars here? Is there a lot of crime?
It's like west. You're on the very bordering edges of Appalachia. Appalachia is like the East Coast. Wait, is it because of air quality?
There's not a lot of thieving and stuff like that now.
Should probably not be going outdoors at all today due to your asthma.
Okay. So it's gotten better in that sense.
Oh yeah, it's gotten better and better and better. It just keeps getting better.
It keeps getting better. Okay, cool.
I mean, the population is going down. Or you walk out here, every one of these streets will be full, and everybody, it'd be bumper
Younger generation.
traffic.
Our generation, most of them left.
Today?
Yeah.
How old are you?
I am 40.
So.
Yeah, if you have low air quality, it's a great day to stay indoors because if you have asthma like you tell me, then you're placed into a sensitive group.
Just slowed down gradually since the 50s.
And the younger kids just don't like to get outside, or what?
These last 2 or 3 generations, I believe they don't really get out much. Most of them can't change a flat, so they ain't. It's a different breed than how we was raised.
They can tell you how to play
Any kind of PlayStation game or anything like that.
Fortnite.
So they're inside on the screens.
That's all they do.
You guys don't want to leave. You want to stay.
Oh, if I didn't have 3 babies here, I'd done been gone.
I've been gone a few times, and I always end up back.
Peak freshness means peak flavor. The strawberry poppy seed salad is back at Panera.
We've had some difficulties.
Apparently marriage has.
It's a gym now? Did you go to school up there?
It was high school then. Then as years went by, it turned to like junior high school.
How was it back in the day?
That was real nice.
A lot of kids?
How you been doing?
I've been doing well, thank you, sir.
This used to be a booming place.
It was booming.
Back in there before, well, when the mine shut down, and the economy went down, people left, and business,
Dang it.
business shut down. At one time,
Oh god. I'm just trying to shift around my chair.
You could buy everything you needed. When did the Walmart shut down? A while back. Okay. So you love Welsh? Yeah. Good
good people out here. Danny, you work in the suntan. You're out there on the poolside with the ladies, or what?
Somebody told me, so you get any darker, you gonna look like me. I go, well, okay.
I'm gonna go up there, guys. I can't walk in or anything, right?
No, it's got a tiny heel box to go up.
Okay.
But you feel free to go in next month, though.
Okay.
You have a good day, man.
You too. Thank you. God bless.
You know, if you actually tap on the banner of a Spotify song and you go under it, there's lyrics.
That they went to. It's the cycle.
Some of them have them.
Life, and everywhere is always at a different point in the cycle. Maybe there'll be a time where people will see this as a place just to get away from everything.
Netherwart, sugar,
Some industry would have to
blaze powder, magma,
as far as
and spider eyes. Those are
living
good.
costs. But it looks like there's some bunk beds in here. New windows, so that's being used. God, I love this old style. Oh, it looks like a nursery or something for kids. So the guys used to run through here between classrooms. You can almost hear the door banging open and closed. The laughter off the walls, down the stairs. Recess about to happen. Bell going off, 3 o'clock, end of the day. Gonna get out in town and hang out with friends. This place got me a little emotional.
I'm going to when the month crosses over.
You guys are missionaries.
Yes. Yeah, we're missionaries.
From Utah.
I'm from Utah. I'm from Oregon.
You know Appalachia pretty well at this point.
At least this portion of it. I think out of all areas, this like the Welch, like McDowell, a little bit of Wyoming is about the
Flint,
most,
I'd say that's a misc item, in my opinion.
You can get.
How have you been received in the holler?
I take misc items like the ones like buckets,
People out
or you
here
can put those in
very
tools.
humble people, very kindly. I served in Ashland, Kentucky, down parts of Virginia and stuff.
Yeah.
And then out here, it's been the most kind people that everyone would let you in. A lot of time they're offering like food and stuff, and it's just really, really nice people.
So it's a good place to be a missionary.
Yeah.
Because some places in America, I'm sure the door just shuts in your face really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I did that once a long time ago.
You did that?
Sorry.
I forgive you.
Okay, you got some names?
Yeah, I just wrote down the Panther and Jolo.
Those are 2 places I gotta go.
Yep.
Take care. Good luck.
You too.
Thank you guys.
Take care.
If you don't ever see me again, I'm in Panther.
Gotcha.
Let my wife know. All right. See ya. It's always interesting to see the missionaries out in the world. They go absolutely everywhere and have zero fear. Take some cojones. It's a one-way road. What, a car every 20 minutes, huh?
Yes.
You guys live right up here.
Yes.
She lives right there, and I live in the first house on the corner.
So what were you saying about your work these days?
I work 68 hours a week, 6 days a week.
68. What's your shift from every day?
5 to 5 a.m. to 5 in the evening, and all the overtime I want.
Do you think people in the country don't understand coal work that well, or what are your thoughts on that?
Working in coal mines, even if it's underground or on top of the ground, it's hard work. You go out 10, 12 hours a day. If you go in the ground, you don't see daylight until the end of your shift.
Yeah.
You work out over top of the ground, you got the heat, you got trucks, you got inspectors you got to deal with. It's not an easy job. A lot of people don't understand it. If it wasn't for coal mines,
Oh yeah, there's some official Guardians of the Galaxy
they wouldn't
playlists.
have
Yeah.
electricity, they wouldn't have heat. And here you got the government and everybody wanting to shut the coal mines down, do away with this, do everything electric. Well, you got to have coal to run electric plants. And a lot of steamships have to have coal to run to transport goods back and forth.
Mm-hmm. A lot of your coal goes to China, right?
Yeah. It's just, you got to learn the people.
A lot of the coal goes to China.
And with people out here, everybody thinks we're just dumb country folk. But actually,
No wonder we
a lot of
can't
us out
keep
here
the lights
support
on.
a lot of people we just work for.
Yeah.
We work hard, we support our families, and we don't let nobody step in between that. People out here will bend over backwards to help you. They'll give you shirt off your back. As long as you don't make them mad or cross them. Out here, a man's word is handshake. locked.
That hasn't gone away?
No, a lot of places around here have.
Thanks, you guys.
Be careful, buddy.
You too. All the best.
There we go. I need to put these lights in. I'm probably gonna start having to label all the rooms.
Alright guys, so this is a hauler. And the hauler is just a narrow road that goes up a valley off the main road. So what I've been told is, in most haulers, everyone knows everyone really well. And, you know, an out-of-stater car, or any different car than they're used to, it's well known. So depending on the hauler, this is just what I've been told, it can be very friendly, very warm and welcoming, or the opposite. But from what I've seen so far in West Virginia, everyone's been very, very, very friendly and hospitable. So let's see if we can get up here. And I don't know what we're gonna see, to be honest. It's looking a little sketch. Alright, sometimes you just can't put the camera on things, and they were junking out on something. Anyways, they were nice at least. I mean, we're deep in now. This is deep, deep, deep countryside, rural America. There's another group of guys I talked to down the road before. I couldn't put the camera on them. That's the problem. You can't just come up and be like, can I put the camera on you? I have to feel it out. You know, a lot of these guys are used to, maybe not used to, but know of how they're portrayed, and, you know, most people, not all, but a lot of them that come into this part of the country, put them under the bus, make them look bad, and so, rightfully so, they're hesitant to be on camera, and I would be too, 100%, I totally get it. So, it's about feeling it out, and then if they're cool, then it's awesome. I can get that conversation on camera and give you guys a look at what it's really like here. It's got quite a journey though ahead. It's at least another 4 hours or so to Kentucky, because we took this back road.
Got it. Got it.
In the northeast corner of Oklahoma, nestled right up against Kansas and a mere 15 miles from the Missouri border, sits an abandoned ghost town.
Let's see.
Humans have evolved.
Let's see if we can find something interesting on this. Reloading the Logitech so I can reach the surface. Oh my god. bankrupt Chuck E. Cheese's. Oh my god. Oh yeah, COVID definitely murdered Chuck E. Cheese, and we can all be honest with that. I'm the one. I did not grow up with this place. I don't really have as much appreciation as people who did. Oh, I've heard I heard the food is just ugh. Like.
One claims it's the company's only chance for survival.
Atari has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection.
Bankrupt. It's a thing called Bright Sun Films channel.
What's up, guys? My name is Jake, and welcome to the 19th episode of Bankrupt. For those who grew up over the last 20, 30, or 40 years, or those who were parents during that time, then you'll probably look back on the family entertainment giant Chuck E. Cheese with a rosy sense of nostalgia. It was the place where a kid could be a kid, with their endless games, sky tubes, pizza, and slightly off-putting animatronics. It was the quintessential indoor entertainment brand that reached across the world and occupied a presence in over 700 locations. But it's also been a company that has struggled for decades, born from a love of themed entertainment, which ultimately spawned copycats and fierce competition. They fought hard in the 1980s through an animatronic war, and were eventually...
Oh yeah, oh my god, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna say sorry about this. Nope, never mind. I hate old Chuck E. Cheese. That is some straight up nightmare fuel. Listen, man, I'm not like cowering in fear at the face of Chuck E. Cheese, like old Chuck E. Cheese, but holy hell, that is uncanny. You take it? Thank you. No thanks. No thanks. Please go away from me.
Buyouts and 2 separate bankruptcies, the latest being in 2020. So today, join me as we discover where
the new guy is not that bad, but the old, oh my god.
Despite its very troubled past, it's still chugging along today. This episode of Bankrupt is sponsored by Nebula. Get 40% off.
Yeah, straight up, if I go up to old Chuck E. Cheese, you know what's gonna happen? I'm gonna give you one hint. Bite of 87. Bite of 23.
This could be any generic arcade or pizza place. This would be a family-friendly dining experience, and would be the instrument for Nolan to build out an amusement park-like atmosphere, harnessing the engineering magic of animatronics like he loved in Disneyland. This was all essentially a passion project for him, something he kept on the sidelines while waiting for the right time to execute his vision. That time came when the Atari company was purchased by Warner Communications in 1976. In that acquisition, they also purchased the restaurant concept Nolan had been developing. Warner ultimately agreed to build out this restaurant concept, and in 1977, using the rat mascot character the company had already been testing out, Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater had opened in San Jose, California. The restaurant opened as a large wood panel-lined space, able to sit a few hundred people, and was filled with the latest and greatest Atari game machines. The numerous long tables with upholstered picnic benches occupied most of the center floor space. But the headliner here was the show space, where Chuck E. Cheese and his animatronic friends would perform shows that had frames recessed in the walls. It was kind of like a jankier version of
POV, you see a homeboy at animatronic wave around a Confederate flag. What? That would be shut down.
All while looking
That's nightmare fuel.
Bushnell's business model paid off. Children loved the space, and families packed in.
I don't like that face. I'm sorry. That's a face only a mother could love.
Spending the tokens at the many arcade machines. Ultimately, a year after opening, Bushnell would leave Atari. But he still saw a ton of promise in the Pizza Time brand,
That shows.
especially given its early success just a year in. He believed in it so much that he bought the name and the rights from Warner Communications for $500,000. Nolan then set his sights on expansion, and he figured he can do that by franchising the restaurant formula, where he knew a few people were already interested. Robert Brock was one of them. He was the owner of the Brock Hotel Corporation, a successful hospitality management company which was also looking to expand. Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater was Brock's perfect business venture to pursue, and he became very interested in building out these restaurants all across the markets he was familiar with. So the two men signed a co-development agreement to build over 200 Pizza Time restaurants across the country. At this point, the restaurant chain only occupied 6 locations in California and 1 in Nevada. But Robert Brock's enthusiasm for the company began to wane, as he discovered what he thought was a better bet to hedge his money on. In late 1979, he was introduced to an engineer named Aaron Fetchter, who had just displayed his animatronic character show at IAAPA. Brock was now thinking that Fechtter's work in animatronics was far more advanced than Bushnell's. Fetchter was also working on something that he called the Rock-afire Explosion, a fully life-sized animatronic character band. Brock was so impressed by this that he envisioned his own family entertainment restaurant, utilizing Fechtter's highly advanced animatronics. So, Brock wanted out of his Pizza Time contract. Following a 2-year-long legal battle, Brock eventually got his way, agreeing to breach their contract with the intent to build his own restaurant. That Brock would have to pay fees based on annual gross revenue for the use of the restaurant concept for a predetermined number of locations. So Brock and Fetchter went out and built their own restaurant in 1980 called Showbiz Pizza Place. Their mascot was named Billy Bob.
Oh my god. That's
Probably
worse than
equally
Chuck E.
impressive.
Cheese's
But
original
despite
mascot.
being nearly a carbon copy of Pizza Time's business model, Showbiz was a hit. The full-sized, fully programmable Rock-afire Explosion band was a crowd pleaser and dwarfed the framed animatronics Pizza Time was still featuring. Hotel Corporation. Within just a year, over 80 new locations had been opened. All of these introducing this new entertainment concept to new parts of the country, and thus quickly capturing and dominating that market share. Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater, on the other hand, was in a losing battle. Fortune published an article in 1982 showcasing the revenue between both these companies, with Chuck E. Cheese's restaurants averaging $250,000 less than the average Showbiz restaurant. Though, interestingly, it also illustrated how lucrative these restaurants were, with Pizza Hut only making $320,000 per store. Chuck E. Cheese was even, on average, generating more revenue than the average McDonald's restaurant.
Wow.
Chuck E. Cheese had more than 110 locations, and Bushnell was intending to expand the brand even further, hoping to open at least 1,000 locations by 1990. He then brought the company public in 1981, and with this new IPO, he focused on chain-wide revamps to the structure of the Chuck E. Cheese experience, incorporating new, modern arcade machines, building new play areas for children, and most importantly, revamping their animatronics to better compete with Showbiz. They did this by building new full-sized characters and a new stage environment.
We're growing because we've made it fun for the family to dine out together with wholesome food and entertainment in the most unique format this side of Disney World.
This stock offering generated around $36 million in new cash. Though, weirdly, the company claimed that around 30% of their stockholders were individual parents who purchased shares on behalf of their children. They even produced annual reports just for kids. Anyways, with new cash in hand, Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time was in a rush to capture more market share before Showbiz could. So, Bushnell continued to expand Chuck E. Cheese at breakneck speed, constructing and opening restaurants at a rate of nearly 2 a week. Over 200 locations would ultimately open by the end of 1983.
That is crack right there.
But with all of this expansion, the company reported losses of over $80 million. The average revenue per location had decreased severely, and with mounting mounting competition from Showbiz Pizza, along with other new chains with similar concepts like Bullwinkle's. The finances of Chuck E. Cheese were reaching a critical point. The video game crash of 1983 had made things much worse, and with the enormous debt from the expansion campaign and a sluggish stock price, the company ran out of liquid cash and was forced to declare Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It appeared that Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater had a very troubled future ahead, and that was if they can emerge from the restructuring. Pizza Time was close to losing $20 million a month, and soon after, Alan Bushnell had resigned as CEO. It appeared that Chuck E. Cheese was headed for Chapter 7, that being the final chapter for the company. But then, in a pretty shocking turn of events, Chuck E. Cheese's very competitor, the chain that essentially stole their idea and expanded well beyond their initial reach, had returned. In 1984, Robert Brock and the now successful chain of Showbiz Pizza had offered to buy the entire company for $35 million. With basically no other option and Alan Bushnell now gone, the offer was accepted. The two brands were merged, and the new parent corporation became Showbiz Pizza Time Incorporated. While this was a pretty shocking turn of events and showed the strength of their corporate power, in reality, Showbiz was also struggling, as the market conditions didn't just apply to Chuck E. Cheese. But Showbiz was cash rich and in a much better place. So they scooped up their largest competitor, and now the company was poised to dominate the family restaurant market. In the following years, Brock would depart from his own company, and a new CEO was brought in to manage the future for the two brands. Or really, I guess his job was more to keep them from falling apart. Showbiz Pizza Time was bleeding money. They were unable to pay leases, interest payments were barely being met, and they diverted all revenue just to make payroll. Over 100 locations would close between both brands during this time. And remember, the Brock Hotel Corporation was also under this umbrella, and also in financial trouble. Ultimately, outside capital investment was injected into the company, and their debt was refinanced to shave off more than half of it. By the mid-80s, a focus was put on the customer and how they experienced Showbiz and Chuck E. Cheese. The quality of food was drastically increased, as was the quality of service families would receive. Lighting was increased, as were the number of windows to make the space feel more alive and less dark and dingy. Really, a bunch of new customer satisfaction initiatives were introduced during this time, as marketing now shifted away from the animatronic characters and more to how all members of the family can now have fun. This allowed new life to be breathed into the chain, and customers took notice. By 1988, the company was spun off into its own entity and away from the Brock Hotel Corporation. By now, the brands were moving towards a unification, knowing that the agreement between them and the company that produced the animatronics for Rock-afire Explosion was coming to an end. New stages were now being fitted into the Chuck E. Cheese locations, the first non-balcony animatronic stages yet. By 1990, the plan was coming together, and it made sense to pick one of the two brands to focus on for marketing and brand reach. Ultimately, Chuck E. Cheese was the stronger of the two brands, and over the next 2 years, all of the existing Showbiz pizzas were rebranded into Chuck E. Cheese. This essentially marked the end for the Showbiz Pizza name. The Rock-afire Explosion animatronics were then reskinned to the characters of Chuck E. Cheese and Friends, many of them becoming the Munch's Make-Believe Band. By the end of 1993, the corporation had over 325 locations across North America. And while revenue fell a bit this year compared to the resurgence it was seeing through the early 90s, it didn't deter the company from continuing to remodel their locations and focus on child safety policies, including the novel concept of banning smoking in their family-oriented locations. Wow! While this was a step in the right direction for cleaning up their in-store atmosphere, alcohol was still on the menu for adults, which probably fueled an uptick in violence at their locations. Though, on the upside, free attractions were also being added, like the Sky Tubes, an elaborate series of tunnels for kids to traverse through.
I loved those. I didn't really go to Chuck E. Cheese that much, but I loved those.
Locations to better compete with rivals like Discovery Zone and McDonald's. Things were beginning to turn around in a very positive way for the corporation. By 1998, they had finally changed their name to better reflect their overall brand, now becoming CEC Entertainment. Revenue was on the rise, surpassing $370 million, and investors took notice of their long-term vision and the work that had been done to bring the company back up from the verge of bankruptcy. Meanwhile, Discovery Zone had gone under, a story I've already covered in its own episode of Bank.
I think I've heard of that place.
CBC Entertainment
Discovery Zone.
and acquired a great deal of
It was like a
assets
Chuck
from
E. Cheese.
CBC
I don't know a whole
stock
bunch about
had
it.
now doubled, and from the consumer side, a new generation of kids absolutely loved this place. Through the early 2000s, Chuck E. Cheese had huge brand recognition across North America, now with over 400 total locations. Investments were being made all across the chain, from new attractions and games to a new toddler zone, along with constant improvements to the overall customer experience. It was the place to host your birthday party, and for me, as someone who grew up during this time, I remember my time here fondly. Hundreds of thousands, even millions of kids all across the continent also happened to agree, and this all reflected in their overall sales. By 2004, a new company logo was introduced, while some locations began receiving updates. However, not all of them. Cutbacks across the chain began to be noticed, primarily in the animatronics, which in some cases had been scaled back with limited movement. All new and updated stores by this point were only installing one Chuck E. Cheese animatronic figure, while several shows had been replaced by what they called the Circle of Lights. Clearly, the animatronics were costing too much to maintain, and management had now figured that customers wouldn't care as much if they scaled things back and saved on the maintenance costs. In the short term, and in a lot of cases...
Oh my god, I love the games where you throw the ball down the lane. It's like the bowling, but it's like the, I think it's called curveball. I don't know if that's what it's called. God, this chair is flaking off. But like, you know, you throw the ball down, it lands in one of those holes at the end. It's like you know what I'm talking about. But skee ball. But you know what the funny thing is that if you I'll give you one hint. If you found the machines at the corner, and you could be a turd and you could just toss them right in, and you get like infinite amounts of tickets. I love that.
Didn't really notice in a way that would affect attendance, and the birthday party hub of the early 2000s kept a steady stream of net revenue, crossing the $800 million mark in 2008, just as they were approaching 500 worldwide locations. But through the recession, the company intensified their cutbacks and focused on implementing
I've heard about her. She is not liked.
Attractions that cost money. They did this by removing previously free attractions like the Toddler Zone and the beloved Sky Tubes. They were replaced by these new attractions, ones that cost tokens to play like bumper cars. By 2012, sales had begun to slump, losing around 2% of the sales they had posted the year prior. Corporate wanted to make some changes, so they decided to rebrand. Things then got very flat. A thinner wordmark was introduced, along with Chuck's mascot caricature becoming two-dimensional. He also became a different species. While he retained a similar appearance, he was now turned into a CGI rockstar mouse, which also included a voice change. This rebranding didn't go over well, and sales didn't show any signs of recovery. Then in comes Apollo Global Management, a massive private equity firm that has taken high equity shares in companies like Oceania Cruises, Regent Seven Seas Cruises, AMC, Great Wolf Resorts, and Harrah's Entertainment.
Whoa.
They saw promise in
those guys are big.
CBC Entertainment to now better accommodate the revolving door of generations of kids. So they bought up $335 million worth of their stock and borrowed another $1 billion to fully acquire the company and take it private. As you might recall, this is what happened.
I just put that in a shulker box, then put it in your chest.
Private equity interest buying up a controlling stake in the company. Just like with that acquisition, CEC Entertainment would also now have to take on the $1 billion debt load Apollo took out to purchase the brand. Not exactly the best thing you want to do when sales are slumping and just put on $1 billion worth of debt. This was no problem though, according to their new owners, as the company got to work, figuring out new ways to boost profit margins and renovate locations. They also acquired Peter Piper Pizza, another family entertainment brand, and almost instantly gave it the same boring logo treatment that Chuck E. Cheese had suffered through. Speaking of which, their logo was also changed in 2017, now to better reflect the changing brand strategy. That strategy came to a head that year, in the form of Chuck E. Cheese 2.0. This was a total rethink for the brand, essentially a clean sheet design approach, renovating restaurants with
I have Chuck E.
interior
Cheese in
design
Bloomington.
and muted colors, both inside and out. Many of the larger attractions would be removed.
Yeah, it's
as
very
well
close to
as
Barnes and
the
Noble.
beloved animatronics.
I'll say
In both cases, they would
it's
be replaced
like
by
it's a
interactive
very
LED
yeah, it's
artists,
dead at this point
large screens
because guess who
for
moved in
occupied
very
sections
close
of the
to
wall,
that?
all while the iconic gold tokens had been
Texas
switched from
Roadhouse.
plastic cards, and the menus had been enhanced for better appeal to parents. I think
Texas
the
Roadhouse.
general consensus
If you don't know, for like
in some
years we've
cases
actually had to deal with Texas Roadhouse being in Peoria, and they finally moved to Bloomington, the superior city to Peoria, and it's great. It's amazing. I love it. They have the best food in my opinion. But the chicken, my chicken goes to my work. Yeah, definitely.
was that it looked awful. I tend to agree with that sentiment, as it looked very flat and modern, though in my opinion,
What?
in a very ugly way. One that likely won't age very well. It
No.
sucked the remaining quirkiness or fun out of the design for these locations, leaving behind a rather generic-looking
So-
family facility. And we all know kids love
I know.
generic-looking family
How about
facilities.
in Russia it's Suka.
I think it was ironically announced on their 40th anniversary. It's like, we're the anniversary! Here's our new way of what we're gonna do.
Look what I'm doing on this school. Have you seen it? I'm doing something smart. Instead of installing a top ledge, I replaced it with grass. In the middle I have slabs, and behind it is lights that turn on and off.
Roll it out across America, spending as much as $570,000 per location. By this point, Chuck E. Cheese had failed to pay off any of its debts, merely just getting by in interest payments. The costly renovations and high expenses caused them to lose money every year apart from 2017. And as the decade was nearing a close in 2019, the company had managed to keep revenue somewhat steady, approaching the $1 billion.
And on the I heard it you say it, on the grass I'm installing trapdoors, and now it makes it look better. I'm making a school, and unlike a normal schools, I want this to be nice looking. Because most schools that in modern day, they suffer from being dreary, old, outdated, and completely depressing looking. If they simply just revamped how schools were designed, I believe student progress would exponentially increase. I'm not gonna. Every time I hear your dryer go off, it sounds like the gulag sound. Hold on. Hold on. What's it called? Gameplay. Here, I'll play this. Ready?
You return to the front
Let's listen.
line. If you lose, you're done here.
I told you, it sounds like the gulag sound. It's so weird.
741 stores. Despite all of this success, it also meant they failed to pay off any of that $1 billion worth of debt. In fact, they were only adding to it by investing in the 2.0 renovations. So, with their plans not exactly working out the way they had hoped, it seems that Apollo wanted to dilute their stake in the company and find new cash and new investors, all with the intention to bring CEC back to the public stock market. To do that, they made a deal with a British private equity firm who was going to merge CEC Entertainment into a shell corporation they had set up. The appraised value for the company was at $1.4 billion, just $100 million more than what Apollo had originally invested. However, by July 2019, the deal had been scrapped, and the hopes the company had for new cash to pay off debt had been erased, along with dreams of a new IPO. But even without all of these plans, the company was still hanging on. It would take... Really, what were the odds of that? By 2020, the pandemic had forced the closure of basically every single restaurant they owned. Remember, this is a business model that is based around dine-in food, birthday parties, and arcade machines.
Man, I miss the world pre-COVID.
Meaning they were forced to close through
Pre-COVID
March.
era
The
was
company
like
furloughed
amazing.
thousands of employees and took on massive financial losses. They scrambled to find uses for their idle locations, like utilizing their kitchens as ghost restaurants, serving under the name Pasquelli's Pizza on delivery apps. Eventually, the chain did reopen in phases.
Oh yeah, they actually
but
did
with
do that.
limited capabilities, focusing on their draw of pizza and other menu items to get people to dine in or take out. Unfortunately for them, most people don't visit Chuck E. Cheese just for the food, and the corporation's
visit for
liquid
the
cash
alcohol.
was running out.
And it was very quiet, very dead. We had maybe like a handful of people all day. It just felt really weird. It felt like post-apocalyptic weird feeling to it.
With barely any revenue coming in, they had to meet payroll, make lease agreements.
You see my
make
stream
interest
how good this
payments,
school is
among
looking
many
now.
other liabilities. A large enough loan to keep enough cash on hand, but as they failed to do so, it became too late.
This
On
looks
June
way better than
25th,
the old
2020,
Bacterian.
CEC Entertainment
School.
had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Despite the company being almost an entirely different entity than it was in the 80s, this was the brand's second insolvency.
Honestly, it kind of took all of us by shock. It sent the whole community, Chuck E. Cheese community, into frenzy. Everyone was like freaking out. Everyone was like, "Oh no, this is the end." Everyone was just panicking.
For the next year, the company continued to reopen stores as they navigated their way through the Chapter
That
11
looks
bankruptcy.
way better
By
than the
January of
second,
2021,
than the other school. It's a lot
CEC
bigger too. It's like
actually
double
made
the
it through
size.
bankruptcy as a new LLC entity, declaring they had successfully paid off over $700 million of their debt and had a stable $100 million in liquidity. This also meant that Apollo's majority stake in the company had been diluted, effectively making Monarch Alternative Capital the new owners of the company. With the dust settled from this bankruptcy and their restaurants all across America now open and once again generating income, the company continued with their store renovations.
No, they're
CEC
yeah, the
had
most
also
hideous
set their
looking people ever.
focus on international expansion, opening new stores in the Caribbean with sites set on the Middle East and
And
South
no,
America.
no, YouTube, don't freaking like smite me down with the face of God. I'm just referring to individuals. Oh my God, not a group. I'm just making sucks how I'm on YouTube. Wait, what? Oh, here's the conduit line. Bro, the Island Boys. I hate the tattoos. I mean, they're fashion sense. I'm sorry. I can't stick with it.
Domestically, the company still continued to operate over 550 locations, as well as 120 Peter Piper pizza restaurants, the latter also being an area of interest for the corporation, as they unveiled the Peter Piper Pizzeria, a more mature and modern take on the same formula. Only this is more focused on the food and has a fraction of the gaming space inside. Still kind of looking boring, but whatever. And that brings us to today. CEC Entertainment is a battered company, and one that has seemed to have been on a noticeable decline for the past 20 years. But even before that, the corporate drama and the rivalries that ultimately formed the corporation that stands today is a testament on how great the idea really was. It was formed from a love of both video games in their earliest form and the unique programmable magic that animatronics could provide to a space. Going to Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time
Yeah, I think
Theater
FNAF
and later
ruined that dream.
Showbiz Pizza Place was an experience that you couldn't replicate anywhere else outside of maybe the Disney parks. It was like having your own weird enchanted tiki room in your hometown, celebrating your birthday with your friends and these characters, and playing in the endless fun that awaits you in their massive restaurants. Children and parents were both impressed and very often satisfied with the whole experience. So even after the corporate battles and takeovers, once all the dust was settled and the two competitors became one, through the 90s and early 2000s, the bots inside Chuck E. Cheese were still a unique and novel show to go see for millions of kids across the country. They became beloved by many and garnered huge fan bases who remember them fondly, some sharing their experiences and boasting praise for the brand, while others archiving, restoring, and tinkering with retired animatronics and getting them going once again. It really is such a cool and lasting concept for so many people. But management was changing, and so was their priorities in what they thought the brand was. Cost-saving initiatives were then implemented across the company. Those animatronics and the maintenance associated were expensive to keep around. And I'll be honest, by the early 2000s, they were looking a little tired and ever so slightly creepy. But even today, there are still full bands that exist, like this location in the Toronto area. On one hand, it's cool to see this relic of the past, but on the other hand, it's looking pretty outdated. Don't get me wrong though, I truly do appreciate this kind of stuff. The animatronics played a huge part in what made the brand so successful. It was a quirky oddity that made them stand out. It was something you couldn't find anywhere else. It gave their locations character, literally. But the problem is that management never saw their long-term value. In fact, they saw them as liabilities and chose not to make them a part of the brand's long-term image and chose not to update them in any way. The animatronics were instead removed in many cases once the company pushed their 2.0 plan. The result was some of those terrifying images of dismembered Chuck E. Cheese robots left to rot in the desert. You probably remember seeing this picture. And all of this likely didn't help the public image of their characters. Instead, their locations were stripped of all classic theming and have taken on a generic-looking, bland space that doesn't really stand out in the increasingly crowded market. Remember, the animatronics set them apart and continue to be a novel concept for many of locations across America. When they removed them and created a generic-looking space, what's really the point of going to a Chuck E. Cheese over anyone else then? Tons of competitors doing basically the same thing as Chuck E. Cheese have sprouted up, not to mention their existing competitors like Dave & Buster's. So the future of the brand is a little unclear. Will their modern take on the brand's image be enough to carry them through the next decade? And will that powerful name be enough to see success in other global markets? Since they're now a private company, it's hard to actually gauge their financial stability. I think the original appeal to North America's youth made sense, and positioned the brand as a unique experience you couldn't get anywhere else. But with kids today, I'm not really sure if you can say that anymore. That, along with the number of negative press stories, as well as the consistent stream of brawls that end up on YouTube, it really puts the brand in a depreciating state. But when you step back and look at all of this, it has been a fascinating and vibrant story thus far, with lots of people passionate about where the company came from. Some have done incredible work on archiving the past, particularly ShowbizPizza.com, who's been an excellent digital resource if you want to find out more about the company and have been a great help for this video. Them, along with the rest of these communities, keep the passion of the original Chuck E. Cheese alive and well. And only because of that community are we able to relive the golden era for this unique and nostalgic company. Perhaps it's the only reason why the modern-day audience and kids are so interested in the brand. So now, it's either a
in my opinion, kids born after 2005 don't, or 2005, 2010, they don't know how good it was back in the day. I already feel old as hell too. Like, bro, like, you see my bro out here, you know what I mean? I'm still using CD discs. my parents still have a hoard, an absolute hoard of VHS tapes. We do have VHS tech here. I think I have a VHS tape player in my room. Let me see. I don't know. I feel like I have a tape player. Is that a tape player? Oh, no, that's not a tape player. Yeah, compact disc, CD tech. Oh my god, I remember the old disc player. I remember once, like, there was no, like, Disney Plus. There was no, like... There was no Netflix that much back then, like back like 2010, like not as prominent as now. Like you wanted to watch a Disney movie, you had to spend 5 minutes scrounge up the disc from your hoard of discs, and then you have to pop it in the disc, and it took like 10 minutes to prepare. Now you just go on Netflix or something, and you just go ahead and find the movie. It's actually insane.
Then you'll know that I'm a big fan of walkable and master planned cities, almost to an annoying point. I love master planned communities and European cities that, in my eyes, are the best examples of what makes a great city. So I've been watching City Beautiful's appropriately named show, Great Cities. I particularly love the story of Central Park and how it was created as one of the first major urban park designs, which emulated the feeling of farmland, with ravines, bridges, and meadows, a place that ultimately made New York City so much more livable. It's a fantastic and beautifully presented series that dives deep into iconic downtowns around the world, and you can only find it on Nebula. Nebula is a creator-made and creator-run platform.
Bankrupt, Bed Bath & Beyond. Dude, I was going to buy this the other day, or a few days ago. Not days, but like weeks. And yeah, they're done. They're basically finished off permanently. Sadly. Bed Bath & Beyond, they just went broke because, like, I remember back then it was like there was a ton of people in there at any given time. Now it's just, but then the last time I went there, it was just like we were like one of 2 or 3 people in the entire, or 3 parties in the entire building. Like it just felt deserted. Like it was dead at that point. Like it was a dying company. And it's not because they did anything bad. It's just no one was interested in their furniture. No one was interested in their beauty and all their home products, and then they just faded away. Why would you go to a store and waste your time ordering that stuff when you can just go online and order what you want instantly? And yeah, COVID basically put, like, if you were not a big giant company, you were basically gonna die of customers. It sucks.
Your overly competitive brother. Check. Psych.
I love those commercials. The Allstate commercials where the guy messes things up.
You don't have the right home insurance coverage? Well, you can end up paying for all this yourself. So get Allstate.
That's funny. I love those ads where like he starts tearing stuff. I'm a bear. I'm gonna go into your car and destroy it, and he just starts wrecking the car. Finally, an insurance company that actually makes me laugh at their commercials. Yeah, in an actual good way too.
Atari has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection.
So this one's Bed Bath & Beyond. I remember this store. Yeah, they, like, I'm around the news a few weeks ago, like, they just announced that this place was closed, and then this place has survived for such a long time. Now it's gone. Yeah, if you don't know, Bed Bath & Body Works is where you could buy mattresses, pillows, you could buy, like, home utensils, like silverware, you could buy things like household appliances, basically, like, some dryers, you could buy blankets, you could buy like cooking equipment. Like it was kind of like the place for that. Like basically, like it was actually a pretty good store. I didn't really enjoy going to a whole lot because I just don't enjoy going to see house products, house care and stuff. But it was a pretty good spot to get what you need. Like if you need anything from your kitchen or your bedroom, it was a good place to find it. However, I can imagine that bigger brands definitely did put the nail in the coffin for these guys.
Kitchen utensils, home goods, linen, or if you just moved into your college dorm and you need the essentials on a budget, then Bed Bath & Beyond was probably your go-to store. And it makes sense why. Their locations were quite literally filled to the brim with an
Oh, they were filled to the brim. These stores, like they had, I'm not kidding you, they, like the shelves for the stuff you could buy were up to the ceiling. I am not, like this guy is right on that. Right on the money. Like these guys had a ton of stuff to buy. Like, yeah, to the ceiling.
Built a massive presence in North America, operating well over 1,500 stores with over 60,000 employees. And unlike their peers who had seen a great decline through the late 90s and early 2000s, the company actually thrived all the way up to 2017. But recently, that all came crashing down, and most of the unique competitive and corporate advantages the retailer once profited from had now killed them. This is an interesting one. So today, let's find out where this recently thriving retailer came from, and the many missteps and executive complacency that ultimately led them to bankruptcy. This video is sponsored by me. My brand new merch is out right now at shopbrightsonfilms.com. Stick around to the end of the video to find out more. It began with Leonard Feinstein and Warren Eisenberg. The two men were working at a dying discount department store called Arlen's, and both of them had seen the writing on the wall. They also saw the industry moving towards specialty stores for individual product categories. So they decided to partner up and create just that. A specialty store focusing on bedroom linen and bathroom products. They called it Bed & Bath, and opened their first store within a strip mall in Springfield, New Jersey. It was 1971.
There's so many
Their small
Springfields.
store did pretty well, carrying brand names with customers clearly liking the boutique-style feeling of a specialty store and home accessories,
You are
especially at a
breathing in the
time when
mic,
the
by the way.
suburban middle class was growing. So Bed & Bath expanded further through the 70s and into the early 80s, opening another 17 stores across the Northeast US and California. But their retail position was being challenged by other small-scale retailers focusing on the segment as well, mainly linen and things. They even had a similar
mine
name.
does. Mine's very
So
sensitive
Eisenberg and
too.
Feinstein came up with something to differentiate themselves. They called it the Bed & Bath Superstore concept, and opened one in 1985. They absolutely packed this new 20,000 square foot store with just about every choice you can imagine from their existing product categories. But they also built out an extensive home furnishing section as well.
How can you even hear a
This
fire
gave
alarm? You don't
customers
even have
the
any
blessing
fire
of choice,
alarms
packing
off,
multiple
do you?
brands, colors, sizes, and fabrics. This is now known as a category killer, meaning they offered an unmatched selection in a single category, and they did this all at affordable prices. Bed & Bath wanted to become the go-to store for those specific needs.
Oh, and they did become the
This
go-to
more or
store
less
to do
worked,
that.
becoming a pretty large hit with their target customers. Since the stores were now offering home furnishing products, in 1987 they changed their name to reflect this new superstore direction, changing it to what we know now as Bed Bath & Beyond. Through the late 80s and into the early 90s, the brand continued to expand, but only in a modest capacity, opening just 7 new superstores by 1991.
I
Sales,
finished
on
the
other
second
hand,
floor.
were anything but modest, blowing past $130 million with an impressive net income of $10 million, all of which was just funneled back into the company for future growth. Feinstein and Eisenberg were known to be frugal bosses, saving money wherever they could, and that helped keep profits high. Though the two did concede to industry trends like an electronic inventory system. Management also emphasized the importance of customer service. Bed Bath & Beyond already broke the mold of existing home goods stores, making shopping for home decorations and comforts a fun and somewhat engaging experience. The company wanted to reinforce that by making other aspects just as pleasant, and they did so by offering a generous return policy, keeping stores clean and tidy, offering free shipping, and cultivating a fast and friendly purchasing environment. This kept customers coming back and allowed the word of mouth to be their primary source of marketing. With over 30 stores now operating across the states, Bed Bath & Beyond went public on NASDAQ in mid-1993. Bolstered by the launch of their new flagship Manhattan store, the company's stock was a hit, nearly doubling its IPO in less than a year, all while the company reported record sales of $216 million and equally stellar earnings. Competition was fierce though, as Linen & Things essentially copied their entire product and layout strategy. Their market share and overall sales.
That's loser ideology.
Regardless, Bed Bath & Beyond continued to gradually expand through the late 90s, entering
Yeah,
the e-commerce space through a buyout in 1998. Sales were exceeding expectations, and just before the turn of the millennium, the company reached sales of $1 billion in 1999, with an impressive $200 per square foot in sales, with over 250 stores. But the year 2000 would skyrocket them into even further growth, as sales had now doubled to $2 billion and an additional 50 stores marking territory in 41 states. Through the early 2000s, the company continued to expand aggressively. The brand had now reached across America with a brand image as equally massive as their growth strategy. Bed Bath & Beyond became an integral part of the home furnishing shopping experience for many Americans. Along with their established pro-consumer practices, the brand heavily encouraged coupon use, sending out millions of the well-known blue 20% off.
Oh yeah, and it said that they never expire. Well, sadly, now they have expired.
Drawing in millions of deal-hungry shoppers. By 2005, net income had soared to over $500 million and crossed over $7 billion in sales. The company was well loved by both consumers and Wall Street, with many analysts adoring the huge returns the company's stock generated, up more than 4,000% since their IPO. The company made their entrance into a new country in 2007 with stores in Canada, but hit a speed bump with the recession of 2008, putting a dent in their net income and sales rather hard. Consumer spending was down and the stock fell with it, but so did other brands as well. Linen & Things, their longtime competitor, ultimately declared bankruptcy during this time and closed all of their stores after converting to Chapter 7. This allowed Bed Bath & Beyond to take control of the market share they left behind and ultimately reign supreme in the decades-long competition. The brand sales then exploded from here on out. With both massive expansion and appealing to trends of customers, the company reported record sales and income year after year. Stores had now surpassed 1,000 across the United States and Canada, with sales ascending past $10 billion. By 2013, the brand made an astonishing $1 billion in net income, which is a pretty incredible feat for a retailer, especially in the early 2000s, not to mention the fact that they only had 250 stores just 13 years prior. However, the cracks in the foundation of this enormous retailer were starting to form.
Do you ever bend your knees? If you said yes, premium collagen may be for you. Vital Proteins. Exmark mowers were born to deliver legendary reliability, signature cut quality.
I don't have enough money for Exmark.
The retailer purchased the Bye Bye Baby brand for $86 million. In 2017, they purchased the much smaller brand called Chef Central for just $1 million. The only problem there was that both of these companies were started and owned by the original Bed Bath & Beyond founders' sons. And some in the industry were understandably calling these acquisitions a direct result of nepotism and even corruption. The company claimed that Feinstein and Eisenberg recused themselves from the actual transactions, and that independent lawyers reviewed it and presumably approved the legality of the sales. But, I mean, still. The board of directors were also packed with longtime loyalists, and made up of people who have been serving on the board for well over a decade, much longer than the norm of the industry. This is what I would consider to be a recipe for a reluctance to change and listen to new opinions. The years of success for the company were starting to wane, and things were beginning to fall apart. That $1 billion in net income in 2013 was the peak. and the following couple of years saw a decrease in profits despite 2018 being their peak of sales at $12.3 billion. Once analysts' revenue targets began to miss, their stock also began falling, and this
I'm gonna eat lunch here in a second.
With expenses growing exponentially and profit reaching a dangerously low point, the company's leadership was due for a change. Investors agreed, and in 2019, 3 activist investment firms acquired a 5% stake in the company to spark just that. Activist investment firms are basically private equity groups that specialize in buying a minority stake in established public companies and oftentimes force change when red flags begin appearing. They also took issue with the aging and complacent board of directors, the suspicious acquisitions, and the increasingly poor state of their stores. If you've ever been inside a Bed Bath & Beyond, then you'll know it's a cluttered mess with a lot of product. Now, this was seen as a competitive advantage years ago when selection was king. But now it just looks like a messy, overwhelming junk pile. Employee morale was also a well-known issue, with high employee turnaround and overall low enthusiasm. The activists had a lot to change and ultimately pushed out their CEO, pressured both co-founders to step down, and influenced the resignation of nearly half the board of directors seats. By this point, the retailer had over 1,000
This is a cool looking building
across North America. But expenses were mounting and the company was bloated. By the end of fiscal year 2019, the brand had posted their first net loss. The activist investors began implementing their plan on turning things around, starting with the closure of around 40 locations. This was in tandem with their plan to control costs and cut down the bloated structure they had in place. This meant cutting down on the number of suppliers they bought from and purchasing more of their stock from overseas instead of going through US-based middlemen. Those 20% off coupons were also reevaluated. Many people used them as the only reason to shop there and hesitated purchasing anything else that wasn't on sale. Management's response was to place limits and tone down coupon use and distribution, though this likely had more negative effects than good. The customer experience was also looked at with a microscope, testing out new store concepts like the implementation of a cafe. Lab stores were open to test new product categories like food and drink, all while the company announced they would be investing in private label brands to help set their merchandise apart from others. This was another aspect of the business the company had been struggling with. Consumers found it difficult to find a reason to shop at Bed Bath & Beyond when everything sold there could just be found online, in some cases direct from the product's brand. For some, those stores became a showroom to test out what those products felt like in person and then just order them online. It also didn't help that Bed Bath & Beyond's website was a clunky mess that wasn't very pleasant to use, especially compared to other competitors in the space. So their market share in the online sphere was minimal at best.
Alright, so I'm gonna go eat my lunch. We have completed second floor, and we're about to do third floor, which is the final floor. This is gonna be grades 4, 2, 4, 3, 2, and 1. What? Maybe, I don't know. I'm going to finish the school at least. I'm gonna hopefully by the end of the week. Hopefully, I'm sorry. If I don't go get more coins, I will try to do the parking garage. Man, we got this entire middle section filled. The city is growing exponentially. I'd say at least, 30%. After school's done, 30% to 40% could be done. I'd almost go as far as say we're almost halfway done with the city after we built the school. In terms of size. 40-50%. And I'm gonna go. Be right back, guys.